Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of He Said, He Said, He Said, a look at the world from a seasoned Black man's perspective. I'm Alvin King, and I'd like to welcome you to this wonderful Friday, January the 28th, uh, 2022, where it is freezing where I am. Okay. So hopefully, if you're in a warm place, appreciate it because it is cold here in Washington, D.C. But thank you all for joining our show tonight. We are happy that you are with us. And for those of you who sent me emails and texts last week because you were on the show, but you didn't hear that we were going to be dark last week. Thank you for inquiring, like where are we and all that. We really do appreciate it. But we are here tonight, back with you, and again, we appreciate you joining us tonight. As part of our Managing Your Finance series, we are talking about estate planning. Legal practices and social customs have traditionally made it more difficult for people of color to own real property. This combined with the stigma of making end-of-life plans has people of color disproportionately underrepresented in the entire world of estate planning. Terry Franklin, trust and estate litigator, is on a mission to change all of that. Mr. Franklin learned from the story of his great-great-great-grandmother's emancipation from slavery in 1846 that doing an estate plan may be also an important way to be anti-racist. That's right. And Terry is here tonight to talk to all of us and share his experiences and share his story. If you have any questions, ladies and gentlemen, please ask your questions. We want to hear from you because I know you have some about estate planning. And if you're anything like me, 2 years ago when COVID hit, I started making plans. If I didn't know anything about estate planning, I know now because that moment scared me. But tonight we're going to answer all your questions, and we're going to do it with a great cast. And two of them I'm going to bring on right now, Mr. Vash and Mr. Nigel Ashford. Hey guys.
Hey, Alvin, how are you doing?
I am well. I am well. I am well. It seemed like, we went dark last week, but I missed you all. It seemed like it was forever. It was like, where are they?
It seemed like a long time. And speaking of dark, you have come back here quite dark.
And lovely, and lovely,
always
and
lovely,
and lovely.
The sun was good to you,
It
our
was
vaccinista.
It was good. It was good. And I'm here. I know it's winter, and I'm appreciate I'm home. But the break was good. But I did miss you guys. I cannot lie. So thank you guys for being here tonight. So what has been going on with you guys this week? Anything that you want to talk about? Because there's been a lot of stuff going on. A lot of stuff. A lot of surprises. Yeah. And a lot of people. I hate to talk about. It's so eerie to talk about death, but it seems like last week, from Regina King losing her son, losing her son so young. I don't know. I still don't know why he took his life or how he took his life, but I did know that he took his life. And that alone kind of shook me. And and then hearing about Terry Mugler, who in the fashion industry of where, I kind of live and breathe. He was one of the designers that I was able to work with, while he was alive. And of course, anybody who knows about Terry Mugler, his collections were like timeless. Okay. I mean, I'm talking epic. And then Andre Leon Talley, his death really shook me because I looked at him as being he was the person I looked up to in terms of, oh, look at that Black man doing that thing in fashion and how they appreciate him, so.
Was he an inspiration? Go ahead, Nigel.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alvin, I just want to go off of what you said, especially with Regina King's son. I think as African-American men, we really need to look at those numbers that African-American men are one of the leading ones who are taking their lives around this time. And it's crazy, but I just want to thank God for mental health mental health therapists, psychiatrists, a lot of our African American people are in our community now understand the benefits of seeking mental health and mental assistance. I thank God for my therapist. I got my first one back in 2020 when COVID was like just on us. So just going on that if you feel something, or if you feel like something's wrong, like seek that mental health that you need, seek that therapy that you need. And also to go off of your Andre Talley comment, I hate when people say that person was before their time, because if it wasn't for people during that time, like this man was raised during Jim Crow era, going from DC to a small town in North Carolina, raised by his grandmother. And now he went from New York Times, Ebony Magazine, to the creative director of Vogue. And that was, and like you said, look at that Black man. And he, because of him, he was able to open the doors for so many people of color, and also show that it was okay to be a man who was fashionable, Black, who was metrosexual. It didn't have to come with this huge masculinity. He had color, he had flair, he had all these things, and he paved the way. And most of all, like you said, he had style, and he just created such a pathway for so many Black people, Black men especially, that shows that we come in all different shapes and all different sizes, and that we just don't fit that hyper masculinity role.
Wow. I mean, Nigel, you couldn't have said it any better. And me being a fashion producer and seeing someone like Andre Leon Talley embrace who he was and earn the respect that he had, it fueled me. It told me that, you know, I didn't have to walk into a room and had to conform to, from the show last week. I didn't have to, wait, I'm sorry, I started laughing because that's terrible. That's terrible. I didn't have to code switch, okay? I could be Alvin. And Andre Leon Talley really fueled me in that manner where, hey, and I was appreciated because I was who I was. And so, yes, he did pave the way. He did. He did. Vash, you were going to say something?
Well, you answered my question. I was going to ask, was he an inspiration for you getting into fashion? And he was an inspiration for you being who you were, period. So that's, you know, yeah. Andre Leon Talley, Sylvester, these were two big Black men who really paved the way for so many of us. Grateful that he was here and definitely missed.
Well, he will be missed. Andre Leon Talley, rest in peace. But brother, you better know you paved the way for a lot of people. And even Nigel Nigel, and I'm saying Nigel, what you just said about, you know, people respecting or, you know, knowing Andre Leon Talley in your age group and respecting who they are and knowing who he is. Nigel, I couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Let me say hello to a couple of people.
Yes,
can you go ahead?
I want to say hello to Edgar. Thanks for tuning in. I sent him a link. I'm like, we are going live. Get on this show. So thanks for tuning in. Alana, hello, high school friend of mine. Rose, you know, you're here every week. We are so grateful for you. Stephanie Elkins, thank you for joining us. Derwin Edwards, because Stephanie's big in mental health as well as aging support. Derwin, thank you for joining us. Jessup, hello. It's so, look, we got the family all up in here.
We got the family up in here. And you know, one more thing I also to add to what Nigel said about mental health, you know, a young Black mayor here in Hyattsville, which is right next to DC, he committed suicide this week. And so that is, you know, again, to your point, it is so important to get help and, you know, and speak to someone and just, again, take care of that part of your life because your mental health is so important. So Nigel, thank you for bringing that up in that vein. So I appreciate that as well. Hello, everybody. Okay. Are we ready to talk about estate planning?
Yes, we are. This is such an exciting topic. People have been excited about talking about estate planning. We've been talking to Randy for so long about how to build generational wealth and your finances, getting those in order. Now that y'all have all that information and you've got some money and some property, now it's time to talk a little bit about estate planning. And this is going to take a really great turn in this conversation because we've got some history to talk about, love and all kinds of things. So yeah, let's jump into it.
All right, Stephanie says estate planning is sexy. Girl, I like that. You made me sit up on my chair, Stephanie. Okay, so Terrence M. Franklin is a seasoned attorney with nearly 3 decades of experience handling trust and estates and probate litigation disputes and appeals. Mr. Franklin has extensive trial and appellate experience, including successful published appeals and the landmark Moeller case, which has brought before the California Supreme Court. He has been recognized by numerous industry awards, including receiving the Lifetime Achievement Award by Chambers and Partners Diversity and Inclusion in 2021. Mr. Franklin was also named Best Lawyer of the Year in 2016 for Trust and Estates litigation in Los Angeles, which is awarded to individual attorneys with the highest overall peer feedback for a specific practice and geographic region. Admitted to practice in California, Terry is a graduate of Harvard Law School and obtained his Bachelor's of Science from Northwestern University. Prior to Sachs, Glazier, Franklin, and Lodise, he practiced with the Los Angeles office of Morrison and Foerster and as a partner at Ross, Sachs, and Glazier, LLP. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and family, please welcome to our family now, Mr. Terry Franklin. Terry, come on in here, guy.
Hey, how are you?
Hey.
It's great to see you. It's always nice to have people say nice things about you before you show up. You're like, oh, okay. I didn't know I had all that going on. So.
Terry, thank you.
Terry also went to school with former First Lady Michelle Obama. So perhaps before he leaves, he might have a story or two to tell. But we got to talk about estate.
We went to high school together and law school, and then Barack was a couple years behind me, so it was a little overlap.
That is so dope.
Am I talking to royalty? You better wear that. I'm talking to royalty. Terry, thank you. Welcome to our family, man. Okay, we are so happy that you're here. We've been talking about this topic, and to have someone of your stature and your experience to share with us tonight is really an honor. And I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. When Vash suggested that I might want to come on the show, I was like, okay, yeah, I'd love to. And I know we're talking a lot about estate planning, but the big reminder for everybody is that I fight about the stuff that goes wrong, but that's part of the reason why I think I probably can talk some about how important it is, because so often people don't get their stuff together in advance. So I'm just happy to be here. It's a Friday afternoon here, and I guess it's evening where you are, but here on the West Coast, it's still sunny, and I'm not going to talk about the weather because
no, please don't. Please don't.
You don't want to know.
In my Medea voice, we got you. Okay, so Terry, I'm going to open the show tonight with questionings. So as I mentioned, you are a trust and estate litigator. Can you share with us what that is and what is your role?
Absolutely. So, there are people who do trust and estates in various kinds of ways, but I'm a litigator, which means I go to court. I do will contests, there's family disputes, somebody might, somebody who's a trustee of a trust runs off with the money, and so they go after him, or beneficiaries aren't happy with how things are managed. All that kind of stuff is what I get into. So, those kinds of things are what I primarily do. I've been doing this since, 1992, and have had various cases. Sometimes you end up with those. One of the first cases I worked on involved Andre Cleveland's estate. Too often we don't have the planning done in advance. And so that's part of the reason why this has become sort of a mission for me, is really to encourage African-American Black people to really make sure that they have their stuff in place. You think you're prepared, but you got to make sure you're prepared not only for death, but also the other possibility that somehow you could be in an accident or something like that. So yeah, trust and estates litigation. I handle disputes that involve trusts and estates and breach of fiduciary duty claims.
I have a question for you. What are the different ways that someone can actually leave or bequeath their property?
So everything is somewhat state by state, but the basic idea is this. The simple thing that pretty much everybody needs is going to be a will. A will basically says who you are, what you own, who you care about, and what you want to have to happen to your property.
So you guys to care about somebody to send them stuff, and you don't care about them if you don't.
Well,
There goes the dividing line.
You
right
know,
there. Okay.
do I really care? I don't know.
We will not have a repass. Okay.
They have this term in the law: the natural objects of your bounty, the people that you'd expect your estate to go to, but ain't always true, because the folk you are in your family aren't always the ones you want to take care of. But yeah, basically the simple, the most elemental parts of a will is that it needs to say who you are, that this is a document that is intending to transfer your property, who it is that's supposed to get the property, and what the property is. So that's sort of the basic fundamental thing. And then many people have what they call a living trust, which is an instrument where you transfer your ownership during your lifetime into an instrument, which is called a trust. And typically you would be your own trustee, so you manage your assets just as you would if they were your own money in a bank account. But it gives you the ability, at least in California, to avoid probate. And probate is the process that happens to a will if you don't have a trust, because when you die, the whole world needs to know what happened to your property, basically, so there aren't disputes later on about what came to your home or your car or whatever. So probate is a process that takes longer. It can take a long time. There's a cost to it. Both there's attorney's fees that have to be paid, and there's a commission that has to be paid to the executor of the estate. So a trust is an instrument that helps you to avoid probate. So many people have a will and a trust as their basic estate plan. And then there's other documents that you should have, like advanced healthcare directives that says, what's going to happen to me if I get sick? Who's going to take care of me? If I have children, who's going to be responsible for my children? And then there's also a general power or power of attorney. That's a document that allows someone else to handle your affairs in the case you can't handle it yourself.
Can I ask this? Oh, I'm sorry, Nigel.
No, go ahead.
I just, on that note, I don't know if this is a yes or no question, but do you have to be married or have to be legally bind to someone to have a will or trust? Okay, all right. I'm just okay. Right.
Absolutely not. You don't have to have any particular relationship. In some cases, maybe that's even more reason why you'd want to make sure, if you're single and don't have anybody in your life, if you pass away, everything's going to go to your relatives. The law assumes that the way that things are supposed to go is that first your children, if you don't have children, then to your parents. If you don't have parents, then to your children's children. And so there's a way that it happens automatically, what we call intestate succession. But if you don't say who it is that you want your property to go to, you have somebody that you care about in your life, a lover, a partner, a friend, charitable organizations. We should be supporting organizations with whatever money we have when we go away. And so all of these are things that you should think about, whether you're single or married, at least if you care. If you like, I don't give a shit, what happens when I'm gone? Yeah, let the property go where it goes. Then I guess you don't need an estate plan. But most of us, especially since we are mature men here, we're thinking about our lives and our legacies, and what our lives stood for and what we leave behind.
Stephanie Elkins said estate planning is good for a family of choice, which is very important for us as gay men, because typically our family of choice is just as strong and sometimes not stronger than blood relations.
Especially that, because then you sometimes have a choice that you've made that your family may not respect or may not be down with, and yet they can come in and make a decision about how your property is going to go, or who's going to decide how your medical care is going to be when you have a partner or a lover. Perhaps you're closeted, and so you haven't shared with your family these experiences. That still happens. That the family comes in and mom's like, no, I don't care who you are, and she has that right by law, unless you take the steps to tell the world what your intention is.
Now, Terrence, I have a friend. He his sister died. She had a life insurance policy, and she left the money towards her kids. And she was making approximately 40,000 a year, let's say. But the life insurance policy was worth $1 million, and she left it to her 18-year-old and her 16-year-old. So, what is your advice when you have such young teenagers who are about to inherit this large amount of money, and how to strategize and make sure that it goes out properly? Because I don't think she knew that she was going to leave so early, leaving a 16 and 18-year-old.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm not an estate planner, and I also don't want to be giving legal advice. But if you have a plan in advance, then you can either set up a trust, so that part of what a trust does is it decides what would happen to your property when you were gone. So even if you didn't have a significant amount of assets, but you had an insurance policy that you knew was going to provide for your children, you can include language in your trust that says, I'm establishing this trust, and it's going to dole out the money with sufficient amount for them to have income for their necessities over the course of their life. And maybe they'll get distributions of 25% at the age of 25, the 50% at age 40, and the remainder at some later age, so that you sort of meet it out, and you get to make that choice if you establish a trust in advance. So these are the kinds of things that are important to give you that power and that control. The other thing for minor children is that they're probably not legally able to, they're not legally competent to own that kind of property. So they may have to have a guardianship set up, which is a whole other process that is similar to the Britney Spears issue. She had a conservatorship, but it's similar in their different states. But that's another thing that you would want to have designated in your estate plan, is who you would want to be the guardian, who would be responsible for making sure that your children's needs are going to be taken care of. And they'll have to, if there's a guardianship established, they'll have to account to the court, make reported accountings, and when that person turns 18, they have to let them know what happened to it. But yeah, planning ahead is exactly what estate planning is. And so it's making sure that you avoid the unexpected and anticipate those things that could happen.
So I see a couple of questions here I want to get to. Robin says, good evening. How do you establish a living trust? And Blue Beatty said, how good is a handwritten will?
Okay. How do you establish a living trust? You'll go see a lawyer. Typically, a lawyer will prepare a trust for you. And what it is, there are ways that you could also sort of make an oral trust, or the court will sometimes enforce an oral trust if you make certain statements in certain ways, but don't rely on that. What you want to have is a document that a lawyer typically has prepared that says, again, the elements of it are very simple. I am who I am. I am establishing a trust, and the trustee is to be, myself until I pass away, or somebody else later on. And their responsibility is to do thus and such. So the concept is simple, and it gets more complicated depending on the complexity of your assets and what it is that you own. The other question was, how valuable or how useful is a handwritten will? If you got nothing else, it's better to have a handwritten will. What we call a holographic will is a will that expresses what it is that you want, but it has to be in your own handwriting in order typically for it to be effective. And it should typically have all the same elements that we would have in a formal will, that it says who you are, what it is that you're trying to do, what the property is, and that you are now making this will, signing it and dating it in your own handwriting. There's different cases that get into where the person sort of made some marks on their document, and then somebody else wrote something else on it, and somebody actually probated an iPad recently in another jurisdiction. It wasn't in California, but weird things happen, and they all sort of get played out in the probate courts, because you have to figure out who owns the property, and as long as there's something worth the value, somebody's going to come to me and fight about it. So yeah, you can have a handwritten will, but if you have a handwritten will, it must be in your own handwriting, and you should make sure that it is signed, and you should make sure that it says who you are, what it is you're trying to give away, and what
Does
your
it have
intention
to be
is.
notarized?
Should it be notarized? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's That's an interesting thing. A holographic will does not have to be notarized. A formal will that is prepared, that you sign, that is not handwritten by you saying what you're doing, has to have, in most jurisdictions, 2 witnesses. California requires 2 witnesses to a will. Neither a will nor a trust, at least in California, are required to be notarized, as long as it's signed by the person who's establishing the trust. And typically also with a trust, you'll also say, attached is a schedule of the assets that are intended to be included in this trust. And so they will usually call that an Exhibit A. But I lost track of whatever the question was, but yeah, there's different aspects to it. So consult a lawyer, a competent lawyer in your jurisdiction. There's an organization called the Association of Black Estate Planning Professionals that was started a couple of years ago. That's a national organization that is sort of collects names of people, and they have a directory and will help you find the right people.
Okay.
Right on. Well, Terry, this is a very specific type of law. How did you get into this particular form of law?
It's a good question. I was doing general litigation when I graduated from law school at a big law firm. And a couple of the people who were partners at the firm, there was a person who was a partner, and he was leaving to start a new practice. And at that time, most people either were estate planners who did probate and did estate plans, or you were a litigator and you went to court and fought about, Dow Chemical or, this company or that company. And there wasn't really probate litigation. You'd kind of not really have the expertise to walk both of those lines. Well, this lawyer that I was working with, who was a partner, who was a mentor to me, said, hey, come work with us if you'd like to try to do something different. And about a year and a half later, I was sort of, when you're young, you do something a couple years, you're like, oh my God, I've been doing this forever. I want to move on. And you look back now, it's been 30 plus years. You go, oh my gosh, I could have done that longer, but it felt like it was forever. Right? But it's perspective. So I left and I joined that firm and found that it was interesting because, it's interesting people with specific facts, and it's not just $1 million here versus $1 million there, one insurance company versus another, but really, these are issues that affect people's lives. So I have found that to be very rewarding. And again, I stumbled on it, but I later learned that this really is my mission because I found some information about my own family history that has led me to understand that I fell into this unusual practice area for a very specific reason.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's a good tease. I like that because we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Well, he had already put a tease out there about his mission. Okay. So
I'm a tease, tease a little.
So
as long as you pay off.
So how did that lead to your life's mission, Terry?
So I'd been practicing doing trust and estate litigation for about 25 years when I found out that there was actually a story in my own family history, a will contest. It turns out that my great-great-great-great-grandmother was an enslaved woman, and she was owned by my great-great-great-great-grandfather. Now, he did a will in 1846 that set her free along with her 8 children and her 6 grandchildren, and they had to make their way to freedom. But I didn't know any of this. And in 2014, I had a great aunt who was turning 100, and I wanted to do something special to commemorate her life and how significant she'd been for our family, because she was born in 1914. She walked 4 miles each way to get her college degree at Southern Illinois University, and she married a Tuskegee Airman, and she traveled with him before he went off to war, and she taught the other children of Tuskegee Airmen, but she was a matriarch in her family. So I wanted to do something special to commemorate her life as she was turning 100. And I remembered, and if I'm going too far into the details of this story, I'll stop me, but I remembered that we had this family reunion a few years before, and part of the family reunion materials included like this little excerpt of a will that was typed up, like in a cursive font, Some of us are old enough to remember fonts. You take that little ball, you put it in the computer, in the typewriter, you type it. So somebody had done something in a cursive font because they wanted to make it seem like handwriting. And it was a short portion of this little will. It was an excerpt that said, I, John Sutton, being of sound mind, but infirm in body, hereby, create this last will and testament. It said, in God's name, amen, at the top. And it said that I own the following property, to wit, a mulatto slave, Lucy, aged about 45, and her 8 children, and it named them all by, name and age, Easter age 27, all the way down to the little toddler who was just 14 months old. And it said, I want them all to be set free and to be moved to a state like Ohio or Indiana or Illinois, a free state. And so, I wanted to try to track down a copy of this will to commemorate Aunt Viola's birthday. In fact, here she is. It's kind of hard to see with glare in my ring light, but there's Aunt Viola there. And that's her husband, wow. Uncle Harold, behind her. That's my grandmother and grandfather there. My great-grandparents are here. So they had... so I wanted to find this document, and I went looking through my old papers back to this reunion from 2001, and I thought, I'm a trust and estates litigator. I should be able to find these documents, right? Because the excerpt in the page said exactly where that they had been recorded, that there was a copy that was recorded in Southern Illinois, Pope County, that there was a copy that was recorded in Ware County, Georgia, where the family had lived, and the original was in Duval County, Florida, in Jacksonville. So I'm like, I'm a fellow in the American College of Trust and Estates Counsel. I was the first. I was the first African American fellow in the college in 2001, and which is still frustrating. Still frustrating to me that an organization that was in existence since 1949 that I had the timing to be the first, because I certainly shouldn't have been the first, and I've been working hard to get more in there. I think there's 6 of us now, but it's a slow going battle, but it's a process. But I knew I had this directory, and I could call people up in Georgia, in Florida, and I should be able to ask them if they could help me. So I called a couple lawyers and I left messages. I said, I'm looking for this document from 1846. And the first person called me back and she said, left a message. Well, there was the Great Fire of Jacksonville of 1901.
Always the fire.
Always
the fire. Burn it down.
Okay.
Burn it down. So there was this Great Fire of Jacksonville in 1901, destroyed the entire city. So she said, you're probably not going to find anything. But then I got a call back from this paralegal, and she said, I got your message. And I started telling about my great aunt and how special she was, this matriarch who remembered everybody's birthdays. And I said, I know there was the fire, and so you probably can't find anything. And she said, yeah, there was the fire, but let me see what I can do. Mm-hmm. So by the end of that day, I had an email back from her, and she said, well, we found a John Sutton file. We don't know if it's the right one, but we should have it by Friday of this week, right? And then this was, mind you, this is the week before I'm going back to Illinois for my great aunt's 100th birthday celebration.
Wow.
And that Friday morning I go in, there's an email from her, and she's like, we found it. It's a John Sutton file. What do you want me to do? I said, take pictures. And across the internet comes these images from 1846 of this envelope with a red wax seal, before they had lick 'em stick 'em envelopes, and you'd fold over paper and you'd seal it. And here was this 2-page document that was written by a lawyer that my great-great-great-great-grandfather had marked his X on, that set our family free. And I was like, this is why I do what I'm doing. Suddenly the light goes on. The light goes on. It was like this amazing moment. And so and I can go on about the process of coming to understand what that meant too. I want to give you guys a chance to weigh in or ask questions if you want, but I'm happy to go on because I love telling this story.
Well, first of all, I want to be, when the story goes, when someone writes the story, I want to be one of the producers, okay? I definitely want to be the producers because you made me smile. I'm sitting here, Yeah, that's all I can say. You've made me smile.
Well, I'm glad. We're actually working on a bunch of creative projects that have come out of this because I think there's so much to learn from it. And part of it is this story about what estate planning can do to something that crosses the 170 years into the future. You know, what we trust in estates lawyers, we sort of stand in this moment between the past and the future. And we try to take a snapshot and capture who you are and what you mean to the world right now, and what message you want to leave to the people that come after you. So that's why it's important to do your estate plan, because what you're saying to the world and to the future is what you cared about in this moment.
Terrence, did you?
Yeah, and I do want to tell you more about the will too, and because it wasn't just the will, as it turns out. But I'll get to that. If you go ahead, go with your questions.
Did you ever connect with like distant cousins who were also descendants from your great grandfather?
We're fortunate because we now have like this. Well, there was already we already had this sort of family reunion group, but we have like a Facebook page, so we all sort of stay in touch with one another. We have reunions every couple of years, and I've been fortunate because the family asked me if I told the story at a reunion on a Zoom last year, and they have fed me information too. I found out some amazing things about other parts of our family and different. I have one cousin who's a scholar who's doing a lot of research on his line of the family and what they've been involved with. So, yeah, it's a way to connect too. I think if anybody who is interested in getting involved in genealogy and family history, there's so many more resources now than there used to be, and things are going online constantly, so that even if you tried 10 years ago, you probably had to go to the library and ask a reference librarian to help you with it, at least when I was growing up. Now you can hop on the internet in your home and read the Jacksonville News from 1846 and find out stuff that is useful to coming to understand your story. So.
Wow. I'm looking at someone just posted, Jeffrey George Moline. He just posted lucysutton.com. Is that, did he just do that? Is there a website for it?
That's actually my husband, who is also
Hey, Jeffrey.
a co-writer.
Hey, Jeffrey.
You hear Vash saying hi to you.
No, okay. Well, we want to make, if that is, I would love if that is a site that our viewers can go to. I definitely want to make sure that we. Thank you so much, Jeffrey.
There you go.
Want to make sure that that all of our viewers go to lucysutton.com. Please, please. Thank you again, Jeffrey.
And I have there's like a podcast page, which is also The Last Will of Lucy Sutton, and we're working on these creative projects. But let me tell you the rest of the story first, if that's okay.
Yes, because there was a contest to the will, wasn't it? Tell us about that.
So so after I found the will and I took it to the family reunion, and one of my cousins was like, I said, maybe we should use the name Sutton, because we hadn't been using that name as part of our family reunion group. And my cousin was like, oh, the white man who raped our ancestor? Do we really want to put that name? Do we want to adopt that? And I said, I feel like this is something a little bit more complicated. It's not quite as black and white as that. And besides, I think Lucy used that name. And I think somehow Lucy had some agency in this. And she claimed that name. So yeah, we could take that name, I think. So that was sort of that moment of experiencing that. But then a few months later, I kept thinking about this story and this relationship, and yes, he owned her. There's no consent. We all understand that. And yet 30 years they were together. They had these 8 children and 6 grandchildren together. And in the end, he made sure that they got to freedom, right? So I got to give him some props for that, for whatever other treatment he might have had for her. And I know that she made sure that this happened. So I was thinking about it, and I wrote an article, and I speculated if somehow something like love could have come through, at least him caring about these children, or her caring enough about her family to make sure that he would get the will done. So after I wrote this article, I got this email from a professor who said she had written a book called Fathers of Conscience, Mixed Race Inheritance in the Antebellum South. And she'd found all these situations where white men had left gifts of emancipation or property to enslaved people. And many times the courts would go, well, yeah, that's what he wanted to do, but we not having no more free Black people in the state. So there's a statute that prohibits the emancipation of people in the state of Mississippi, for example. So you could not set people free. And I was like, oh, wow. Well, this would be really interesting if there was a contest in our family. All I know is there's a will, family made it to freedom. Hallelujah, celebrate in 1846. But I kept thinking, if I ever write this as a novel or a story, and I started outlining a novel, and I thought, well, let's figure out a villain. And so I made up a brother for John, and I called him Eustace because it seemed like a good old-timey name. And I outlined this story about how, he tried to keep them in slavery, but in the end, Lucy gets to testify, and she's like, yes, John Sudden owned me, but I owned him just the same.
And he loved me.
I was dramatic. Yes, he needed me. And, I was going to break it down, right? So I'm thinking about this and creating this outline and coming up with these ideas. And around that time, Jeffrey, who had been a practicing Buddhist for 20 plus years, and I grew up in a Christian household, but he was a Buddhist, and he would chant twice a day, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, and part of it included a prayer for ancestors back 7+ generations. And I normally didn't chant with him. It wasn't something, but this one day I felt moved to, and I got down on my knees, and as I was thinking about the ancestors, I felt John and Lucy were with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know exactly how to explain it, but I felt it, and I don't know whether it's in my DNA, and it makes sense that if our ancestors exist anywhere, they exist in us. So life is never ending. It goes on. It transforms. The energy is still there, but they were there, and they said there's more to this story, and you need to keep pursuing it. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go with this, right? And so 6 months later, I'm going to be at a conference of trust and estates lawyers in Florida, the same organization that gave me the directory so I could track down the document in the first place. And so I said, Jeffrey, while we're in Florida, let's go see the will. And he's like, yeah, okay, let's go see the will. But I forgot, it's like a big state like California, and it was like 5.5-hour drive from where we were to where we needed to get to Jacksonville to see the documents. And we intentionally made it, we were intentional about it, and we thought about the drive, and we looked up the fact that the Equal Justice Initiative was, at that time, establishing the Peace and Justice Memorial, where they were collecting samples of soil from the places where all of the lynchings that had been documented took place. Some 4,000 lynchings have been documented between the Civil War and the Civil Rights era. And the Equal Justice Initiative, Brian Stevenson, who's portrayed by Michael B. Jordan in Just Mercy movie with Jamie Foxx, they were doing this memorial. And so we had this online. You could look up county by county to see where the lynchings were. And so we said, let's count the lynchings in the counties that we drive through on this 5.5-hour drive. And that morning, as I was in the shower and I was thinking the water was coming down, I was like, what's it going to be like when I put my finger on that X that my great grandfather made that set our family free? How emotional am I going to be when this happens? And I kept seeing that scene from the movie Selma, where Coretta Scott King is walking with Amelia Boynton Robinson, and Coretta's a little nervous because she's going to go meet with Malcolm X. The movements are coming together, and Boynton Robinson, who's been through everything, says, do you want me to tell you what I think about at times like this? It gives me peace. She said, we're descended from people who built civilization, people who crossed vast oceans in the hulls of slave ships, people who overcame terrors and tortures unimaginable, people who create and innovate and love, and their blood runs through you, and it's pumping your heart right now. You are already prepared.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what I was feeling, we drive these 5.5 hours, and we get there, and there's 126 lynchings that we've counted, and that each one was, not just a tragedy for an individual, but for a family and for a whole community, and that the terrorism of lynching was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, which is to cause whole communities to make sure they stayed in their place, right? So that was that piece. We go into courthouse, we go through, somebody's like, yeah, that's how you do it, because we're, two gay guys going to the courthouse. I think they thought we were trying to get marriage licenses, because it was one of the 2 counties in Florida that refused to issue any marriage licenses at all, rather than issue them to gay couples. We go through, we go down to the basement, we go to the probate department. I'm like, hey, we're looking for this file. And I called ahead, and the clerk's like, I don't see no file. I was like, well, we called ahead. And she's like, well, you got to come back tomorrow. I was like, oh, no, we drove 5.5 hours. We're not coming back tomorrow. So she finally hands me this file. And it's like a little red well file, like the size of a lady's clutch purse. And it's almost like I have a sense of that great fire of Jacksonville of 1901, that the fire, like smoke and ash almost, that these things have overcome to be here. And I open it up, and it's like the documents are glowing inside, because it's like my ancestors are like, we're going to tell a story. They're going to tell a story. They're going to tell a story. And I open it up, and Jeffrey actually captured on videotape this moment when I open it up, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And I put my finger on the X, and I'm waiting for the emotional release. But the lawyer kicks in, and I'm going, wait, what are these other papers? Wait, what is this? Wait, okay. Here's an inventory. I understand that, 300 cows, every cow is $2, a horse is $50, I'm used to that. But then there's this document that's like petition. And it says, John isn't of sound mind, and that he is wandering in his intellect. And I realized that there really was a contest that was filed by my 4th great-grandfather's brother, whose old-timey name wasn't Eustace, but Shadrach, which was even more old-timey than I could have imagined. So Shadrach challenged the will, and he argued that, that John was crazy, he was too old. He said that they had plied him with ardent spirits, in other words, alcohol. They've been given him to get him to do the will, and that those children who were claimed to be his aren't really his, which was a funny thing, because nothing in the will said they were his kids. So everybody knew these were his kids. This was his family. They lived as a family. And as it turns out, there's the trial transcript was the judge's handwritten notes. So Judge Crabtree, who wrote down what the lawyer said, and the lawyer said, John was supposed to come into town to see me, and I was going to do the will. It was a 2 days drive, and John was too sick. So I went out to the house. I got there at 9:30. His family, not his slaves, his family fed me. I talked to them. His sons explained that they used to live in Georgia, but they moved to Florida because he thought he could set them free in Florida because the laws were different there. But it wasn't until they got there that his sons told him that he couldn't do it. And it said that Lucy came into the room at one point, and they asked her what she wanted to do. And she said, I'd just as soon stay here. But Shadrach has always threatened that he would beat us if he ever came to own us. Now, the transcript then says, of course, her words are disregarded, and it's stricken through. But because I'm a trust and estates litigator who found a file that survived the Great Fire of 1901 in Jacksonville, I have the file, and it turns out that there was a clerk who loaded a bunch of files onto a boat and saved them from that Great Fire. And all of that happened so I could be here to tell you that those words that were struck out were Lucy's words, and that she existed, and that she had a voice about what was going to happen to their family. That tells me a lot about my mission and about why I'm here and why I'm sharing this with you now, because they took an anti-racist act. John Sutton, what does it take for a person to move with 100 miles with 300 cows to a whole different state and set up your family there thinking you can set some people free, and then you find out that there's a law that says, the Florida law said, if you want to set somebody free in the state of Florida, all you have to do is pay $200 per person that you're setting free, which is a lot of money, and pay a fine to the state of Florida. And you have to post a bond for their value lest they become a burden on the people of the state of Florida. Oh, and they have to leave within 30 days because we ain't having no more free black people up in this state. I mean, that's what the law says. You really could not set people free.
Wow. So when people, when
Yeah.
people say that it's not systemic, here we see it is systemic.
It's systemic. Yes, it is.
Right?
So this term anti-racist has been used a few times. Can you tell us what that means?
So, I'm Ibram Kendi, who's a professor and writer and just amazing thought person who's written several books that I think are important. One is called How to Be Anti-Racist. One is called I forgot what it's called, but he traces the history of really racism and the concept of race, racial ideas, and historically how there was somebody who was like a Portuguese trader who was really one of the first people who said, "Oh, even though slavery has existed for a long time and people trade one another and that kind of thing, if we actually, assign slavery to these black people, then that gives us all kinds of advantages of being white, and it creates, these other layers of advantage for us." And so this idea, this concept of race that didn't exist before, people were European, people were African, whatever, people didn't think about black and white originally. But that was imported into the United States and got woven into all of our laws and our systems, and it was used by preachers to reinforce the power of the white men who were in charge. And so Ibram Kendi, who's done this history, Stamped from the Beginning is the name of the other books about racism, talks about the fact that rather than focusing on whether somebody is racist, or using that as a basis for making decisions about how we're going to improve the world, we should look at racist ideas. We should look at, because they could come from anybody, and because we live in a world that's filled with institutional racism, and if we want to eliminate the racism, we have to figure out where those racist ideas come from, and then take steps to counter them. So to be anti-racist is because if you just let things continue to be as they are, if you assume that the air that we're breathing is full of racism, just letting things continue to be isn't good enough. So people who say, "I'm not a racist," or I don't do anything, I'm not a bad person, all of that isn't good enough when you already live in a racist environment. If you want to change the world for the better, then you have to be anti-racist. You have to be affirmatively deciding that you're going to take steps that counter the racism that's built into the institutions that we live in, the air that we breathe. It's like asking a fish, "Can you tell that you're in the water?" And the fish isn't like, I don't know, I'm just sucking it all in. But I think that's the way racism is for us in America. It's all around us.
Terrence, I think that's so interesting because I just recently read an article called "How a Genetic Mutation Led to the White Race," and how the first people were brown people, and it was the location, UV rays, and all those type of things that had to do with the changing of the skin color, and how all of that was developed. And if people don't know exactly where you came from in your history, and that's why history is so important. If you don't know where you came from, you never know where you're going, and you don't know how to fight and argue things or go back and understand that who you were and who we are. And that's one thing what they did for those 300 years. They took that away. They took away history and took away heritage. But the thing about our people, which I find so unique, that we still find a way to incorporate it, from our hair to our music to the way we dance. It's all full circle, and it just comes from our heritage.
Wow. I'm gonna, because we are getting close to the end of the show, and Terry, first of all, let me say this topic, okay? Our topic tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is estate planning and the will of Lucy Sutton, with special guest Terry Franklin. Please click like, share our YouTube page, and make sure that you tell a friend about this show who wasn't on here tonight, because his story have led to comments like, Oh my God, this is amazing. Wow, what a great story. Written years ago, very emotional. These antique documents are something to behold and something else. I mean, we are getting comments from people that you are touching, Terry, that I'm telling you, I'm so touched. I'm forgetting some of my lines tonight, and some of these things are scripted. But I mean, Terry, I do have one last question, but so that we can stay on track with the show and have a closing for Terry that I think will be important to all of us. So, Terry, do you feel that telling your story about your great grandmother, being her witness, so to speak, is part of your life's mission? Now, you might have said something about that, but I wanted to make sure that we clearly got that documented tonight.
Yeah. You know, I used to think, probably like a lot of people, that history was about kings and queens, or princes and famous people, or to ordinary people who did something exceptional, like Martin Luther King or Bryan Stevenson. But uncovering the story has helped me realize that history isn't what's in the books. It's not like bronze and marble. It's what's in our hearts. It's the stories that we tell about ourselves, and it's up to us to figure out how the future is going to be and what history is going to say about us. And so I've determined that it's my mission to bend the arc of history towards justice by sharing stories like this story of my family and my ancestors with people. And I think everybody should figure out what their mission is. Why are you here on this planet? And then lean into it. So my mission, thank you, is to bend the arc of history towards justice. And I'm doing it by trying to tell this story. I'm working on a novel. We're working on limited series for TV. Working on all kinds of things. I have a podcast myself. This is Sarah, by the way. Sarah is my great grandmother. She was 17, and she was a slave. Yes, this little old white lady was 17, and she was enslaved. That's sort of tells you about the craziness of race and how ridiculous it is. We try to say that only Black people are supposed to be enslaved, but people who look like Sarah, who would have known my grandmother, that's how close we are to this history. We can change this. My ancestors did what they could to make the world better, to make it okay for me to be here. And now we have to figure out what we can do. So use estate planning as an anti-racist device, and ask yourself what you can do to bend the arc of history towards justice.
Wow. I can't see all the hands out there, but if you all will just take a moment and clap right now for this show tonight, and Terry Franklin for blessing us, man. He said is a resource, and you have proven that tonight in so many ways, 100 times over, Terry.
Oh, thank
and
you.
I cannot tell you again how blessed we are to have you on this show, and thank you to Vash for bringing him to us. So.
Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at the end of our show, and we're about to sign off soon. A couple of things I want to say before we get to the end. Again, on February 25th, it is our 1-year anniversary show. Some of you who are our, seasoned listeners, you've received an invitation so that, you know what to do with it. Read the invitation, and we want to have you be a part of our anniversary show on February the 25th. You know who you are. Thank you all for listening tonight, for your questions, your comments. Denise, thank you for joining us tonight. I didn't say hello to you, my dear sweet sister. Sean, thank you. Rose, thank you. And we're going to leave you tonight with our words of the week. A good plan is like a roadmap. It shows the final destination and usually the best way to get there. That was written by H. Stanley Judd. And that's in honor of our show tonight with this wonderful man, Terrence Franklin. Thank you for being here again. Ladies and gentlemen, until we see you next week, you all have a great week. And we look forward to seeing you once again on the next episode of He Said.
He said.
He said.
Good night, everybody. See you all next week.
Thank you.